How did I let it get this far? I was supposed to protect him, not blur the lines between comfort and craving. I crossed something sacred. I told myself it was about healing, about reassurance, but deep down, I knew better. I saw his need and made it about mine. I exploited trust. I ruined the one pure bond we had. I discussed myself. This wasn't love, it was weakness, selfishness, and now I can't undo it. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories. The evening settled around me in a familiar silence, soft, still, intimate, the clink of spoons on teacups, the distant hum of the refrigerator, and the delicate whisper of jasmine from the diffuser painted a picture of peace, comfort, and loneliness. At 48, I've learned to appreciate these moments of peace, even when they're accompanied by pain. My name is Clara, a single mother, divorced for 4 years and somewhere between healing and empty. Emotionally deprived? Maybe. I've devoted everything to raising my stepson, Andrew, now 19. Since he was 10, his father walked away, disappeared from both of our lives, and I picked up the pieces. Andrew had always been quiet, thoughtful, unusually sensitive for a boy his age. He grew quickly, 6'3" at 17, but with a gentleness that never matched his size. That night, he came into the house not with his usual grin, but with his hoodie pulled low, his eyes cast in a heavier shadow. It was the way his shoulders slumped that caught my attention, as if he were carrying something he couldn't name. "Hey," he muttered, and in that one word, I heard everything he didn't say. Something had cracked inside him, and he came to me in pieces. He didn't come to sit beside me like he usually did. Instead, he lingered near the doorway, half in shadow, his hands shoved deep into the front pocket of his hoodie. Andrew always carried himself with a quiet self-possession, the kind that didn't need to speak loud to be heard, but tonight, it was gone. In its place was something fragile. "Come here," I said gently, patting the space beside me on the couch. He hesitated, his body taut, uncertain, before crossing the room in slow, careful steps. He didn't sit beside me. He dropped into the armchair across from me instead, elbows on knees, hands rubbing together like he was trying to scrub something invisible off his skin. "I need to talk," he murmured, not looking at me. The softness of his voice unnerved me. I set my tea aside, shifting my body toward him. "What is it, sweetheart?" He swallowed hard. "It's about someone. My girlfriend." A throb of tension bloomed in my chest. I nodded, keeping my tone neutral. "Okay, what happened?" He looked down, face burning with shame. "We tried to, you know. I thought we were ready. But when we got there, she just stopped. Said she couldn't. Said I scared her." My breath caught, but I didn't interrupt. "She said it was too much. Like something was wrong with me." He laughed bitterly, a sound that didn't belong to him. "And now, she's telling people, laughing with her friends, telling them I'm deformed or broken or, God, I don't even know." His voice cracked. He finally looked up at me, and the pain in his eyes stunned me. Raw, wide open, like a wound no one had cared to tend. "Oh, Andrew," I said softly, my chest tightening. "I'm so sorry. That's cruel. And so untrue." He looked away quickly, jaw tight. "You don't have to say that. I feel like I'm not normal." "You are," I said firmly. "You're not broken. You're just different, and there's nothing wrong with that." She was young, scared, and instead of handling it with kindness, she turned it into a joke. "That says everything about her, not you." The air between us hung heavy with everything unspoken. He didn't reply, just stared at the floor like it might crack open and swallow him. I leaned forward, elbows resting on my knees. My voice dropped, quiet but full of truth. "Listen to me, Andrew. You're not alone. You're not disgusting. You're a young man trying to figure out how to feel good in your own skin. That's not shameful. That's human." He blinked, eyes glassy, lips parting like he wanted to speak, but nothing came. I reached out, my fingers brushing lightly against his arm. A simple gesture, but it made him flinch, then melt. It was that moment, that flash of his vulnerability, his desperate need to be reassured, that shifted something in the room. Something subtle, something dangerous, a kind of emotional closeness that tiptoed along the edge of something neither of us had language for. But it was there. And I felt it. Like heat under the skin. Like a line. Not yet crossed, but trembling. He didn't move, but I saw the shift in his eyes, the way they flicked from my hand on his arm to my face. Like he was searching for confirmation that I really meant it. That I wasn't recoiling. That I wasn't lying. I don't want to be laughed at again. He whispered. I don't want someone to look at me and be afraid. I swallowed, letting the weight of his words settle in my chest. No one should ever make you feel that way. Least of all someone who claims to care about you. His throat worked, like he was trying to hold back emotion. You don't understand, Clara. It's not just what she said. It's the way it made me feel. Like my body's some kind of curse. Like I'm not allowed to want anything. I reached over, my fingers curling softly around his. The contact made him go still. Then, a small, barely there tremble. Andrew, I said, gently, you're allowed to want, to feel, to be touched and seen and not judged. You're not too much. You're just more than she could handle. His eyes met mine, and that was the moment. Not lust, not yet, but a flash of hunger. Not for sex, but for truth. For connection. For being seen without being burned. I should have stood up. I should have let go, but I didn't. Instead, I tightened my hold on his fingers and leaned forward. Close enough to feel the warmth of his breath. My voice dropped. Lower now. Intimate. Careful. If I told you there's nothing wrong with you, would you believe me? He hesitated, shook his head. I want to, he said, but I can't. Not unless I know. I drew in a breath. My heart was pounding now. Loud in my ears. I could feel the air between us shift, charged. Uncertain. Every second stretched. Soft and dangerous. I don't want to make you uncomfortable, I said, though my voice betrayed the tension building beneath the calm. You're not, he said quickly. Too quickly. That single admission cracked something open. The silence after was thick, ripe with the weight of possibilities neither of us dared name. He exhaled, shaky. Clara, would it be wrong to ask you something? My throat tightened. That depends. He looked down at our hands, still connected, then back up at me. I don't want you to do anything. He trailed off, embarrassed. I just want you to look. So I know. So I can stop feeling like a monster. That moment hung, stretching like thread pulled taut. I should have said no. But instead, I reached up, tucked his hair behind his ear with trembling fingers. Only if you're sure, I said, barely above a whisper. And he nodded, not from confidence, but from need. And as he stood, nervous, trembling, but trusting, I stayed seated, watching, feeling the pull of something unspeakable. Something true, and terrifying, and real. He stood in front of me, not fully meeting my gaze, his fingers trembling slightly as they hovered near the hem of his hoodie. The silence between us pressed in tighter, filled with the weight of a question that hadn't been asked out loud, but lived in his body. In his eyes, in the uncertain breath he took before finally lifting the fabric over his head. I stayed still, composed, but inside, something fluttered, a mix of protectiveness and tension, the kind that prickles at the edge of something unspoken. Andrew stood there in his jeans and undershirt, eyes low, jaw tight. You don't have to keep going, I said, gently. Not for me. He looked up at me then, just for a second, but it was enough. Enough to see how badly he needed someone to not look away. To not flinch. I need to know, he said softly. I just need to know if what she said was true. There was something devastating in that. Not the words, but the fear behind them. That a single careless judgment had rooted itself so deeply into him. It had started to define who he thought he was. I stood slowly. I didn't touch him. I didn't rush. Instead, I met his gaze head on. And let my voice settle into something soft. But firm. She was wrong. He swallowed, shoulders rising with a breath that shook on the way out. But what if no one else ever thinks that? Then they're not meant for you, I said. You don't shrink yourself to make other people comfortable. Andrew. He stared at me, something fragile glinting in his expression, half disbelief, half hope. I reached for his hand, held it between both of mine. My touch was steady, calming. You're not too much. You're just more than some people are used to. That doesn't make you wrong. It makes you rare. A pause passed. His breath slowed. He nodded, just once. The heat that lingered in the room wasn't about bodies, it was about truth. About standing naked in front of someone, metaphorically or otherwise, and daring to be seen. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he said after a long moment, voice barely above a whisper. I squeezed his hand. "You don't have to find out." And we stood there, quiet, the air between us charged. Yes, but still safe. Still careful. It wasn't about crossing a line. It was about standing near one. And choosing, together, not to run. The next morning, the house felt different. Not louder, not colder, just watchful. Andrew didn't come down for breakfast right away. Which wasn't unusual, but I felt the absence more acutely than before. The memory of our conversation, our closeness, hung in the air like a perfume I couldn't scrub away. I tried to carry on as normal. Washed a few dishes, answered some emails, but my mind kept circling back to him. To the way his eyes had held mine. The way he'd stood there, equal parts exposed and brave. By the time he finally emerged, hair still damp from the shower. Dressed for class, there was a caution in his steps. As if unsure what version of me he'd find waiting. "Morning," he said softly, his voice rough around the edges. I turned from the sink. Offered a smile that I hoped felt real. "Morning. There's still coffee." He nodded, moved toward the counter, poured himself a cup with hands that were just a little too careful. We stood there in near silence. Only the quiet sound of him stirring sugar into his mug. Finally, I spoke. "About last night." He paused. His spoon clinked against porcelain. Stilled. I meant what I said. I continued gently. "You didn't do anything wrong. You asked for clarity. I gave it. That's all." He looked at me then, really looked. And in that moment, I could tell, he was still replaying every second. Wondering if he'd crossed a line he couldn't come back from. "Thank you," he said after a moment. "Not just for what you said. For not making it weird." I smiled. But it was faint. Weird is easy to avoid when people are honest. He nodded slowly. "Still, you saw me in a way no one else has. And you didn't flinch." That silence returned, comfortable this time. But charged. He moved to leave, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. I watched him, part of me wanting to call out and say be careful. And another part wanting to say come back when you're ready to talk again. He paused at the door. Turned slightly. "Would it be okay if we talked again tonight?" he asked. Not like before, just, "I think I sleep better when I hear your voice." My throat tightened. "I'd like that," I said. And with a small nod, he stepped out into the light. As the door clicked shut behind him, I let my fingers wrap around the coffee mug he left behind, still warm. Still lingering. It wasn't just what had happened between us. It was the shift that followed. The silence wasn't silence anymore. It was anticipation. And neither of us knew what came next. Only that we would face it, together. That evening, I made tea. Not because it was cold. Not because I needed it. But because the ritual gave me something to do with my hands. Something to slow my breath. I chose his favorite, chamomile with honey, and let the kettle whistle softly, filling the kitchen with its gentle cry. He came home later than usual. The sound of the front door opening was quiet. Hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he'd still be welcome in the same way. But when I turned to greet him, our eyes met, and that flicker, uncertainty mixed with longing, was still there. "I made tea," I said, offering the second mug as he stepped into the living room. He took it, his fingers brushing mine for the briefest moment. "Thanks." We sat in silence for a while. Not tense, not forced, just waiting for the right words to arrive. Finally, he exhaled. "I felt different today," Andrew said, his voice low, like people were still looking at me the same way. But I didn't care as much. I looked at him, surprised. "Why?" "Because last night you looked at me like I wasn't something to be ashamed of," he said. That changed things. The honesty in his words hit me like a soft blow. Not painful, but deep. "I didn't lie to you, Andrew. I never would." "I know." He took a sip of tea, staring into the steam. It's hard to let go of what people say. But when someone tells you the opposite, and you believe them instead, that's what sticks. I felt it then. How powerful simple truths could be when whispered in the dark. How healing didn't always come through touch, but through being seen. He leaned back into the couch, shoulders loosening a little. Can I ask you something? He said after a moment. Of course. His eyes met mine, serious, open, and searching. Why did you help me the way you did? Not just talking, but staying, holding space, not judging. I set my mug down carefully before answering. Because I know what it's like to feel invisible. Or too much. Or not enough. I said, I've lived in that space. And if I can pull someone else out of it, even just a little, I will. He watched me, quiet, thoughtful. You didn't just pull me out. He whispered, you made me want to stay out. The words hung between us like a secret too big to fit in the room. I reached out, not to touch, but to let my hand rest just near his. A quiet offer of presence. He didn't take it, but he didn't pull away either. We sat like that for a while. Close, but not crossing, speaking, but only half of what we really meant. And somewhere in that silence, I knew, this wasn't over. This connection, this closeness, it was no longer a moment. It was becoming a thread. And we were both holding on. The days that followed fell into a quiet rhythm, like we were both learning how to move around each other differently, carefully. Consciously. There was no grand moment. No obvious shift. But the undercurrent had changed. Andrew lingered longer in shared spaces. He stopped retreating to his room after dinner. He asked more questions, about my day. My thoughts. My past. Small things, but layered with meaning. He wanted closeness. And not just from anyone, from me. One night, a storm rolled in unexpectedly. Heavy rain slapped against the windows. The wind sighing through the cracks in the walls. I found Andrew on the sofa. A blanket pulled around his shoulders. Eyes fixed on the flicker of the television, but not really watching. You okay? I asked, easing down beside him. He didn't look at me, but I saw the tightness in his jaw. I used to like storms when I was little. He said quietly. They made everything outside louder than what I was feeling inside. I paused. And now? He shrugged. Now they just make me feel alone. That word landed between us with weight. I reached over, placing my hand gently on his arm, nothing suggestive. Just solid, grounding. You're not alone anymore, I said. Not in this house. Not in this room. His eyes finally met mine. Sometimes I think you're the only one who really sees me. Like, not just the outside, but the parts one try to hide. I do, I whispered. And I meant it. He exhaled slowly, then shifted, just enough that his head gently found my shoulder. I stilled, not out of discomfort, but reverence. The moment was delicate, real, and there was something powerful in his surrender. The way his body softened beside mine, like he was allowing himself to be held for the first time in a long time. I think I'm afraid, he admitted, voice muffled by the fabric of my shirt. Of what? That if I get used to this, to feeling safe, I'll lose it, and it'll break me. I blinked back the sting in my eyes. Then we don't rush it. We don't label it. We don't force it. We just stay here. In this. As long as you need. He was quiet after that. But his hand found mine beneath the blanket. Fingers laced. Not romantic. Not sexual. Just anchored. And that storm outside? It kept raging. But in the hush of the living room, we found stillness. And the thread between us tightened, not from tension, but trust. From the soft ache of two people who had lived too long unseen. And had finally started looking. It started small. A look from a neighbor that lingered too long. A comment from a friend who had stopped by to drop off a borrowed book. Her gaze flicking between me and Andrew. Curiosity behind her smile. You two seem close, she'd said lightly, sipping tea. Like, really close. I'd laughed it off. Said something about him being the only man in the house. And how we'd always leaned on each other since his father left. The truth, I suppose, just buried under softer language. But the words stayed with me long after she left. Not because they were accusatory, but because they saw something I hadn't meant to show. That evening, Andrew came home from the campus library. Hoodie dusted with rain, hair damp and curling at the edges. I watched him shake off his coat. Drop his backpack by the stairs. He looked different lately. Not in the way he dressed or moved, but in the way he held himself. There was a calmness in his eyes. Still quiet, still gentle, but less guarded. Like he'd finally stopped bracing for the world to laugh. Hey, he said as he passed me in the kitchen. Want to watch that documentary you mentioned? The one about memory and trauma? The casualness of it felt oddly intimate. Not the words themselves, but the invitation buried inside them. Yeah, I replied, drying my hands. I'd like that. Later, as we sat side by side on the couch, legs almost but not quite touching, I felt the quiet build again, that unspoken thing between us. Not desire, not yet, but attachment. A connection no longer just rooted in healing wounds, but in choosing each other, day by day, even in the smallest ways. Halfway through the documentary, he turned to me. The flicker from the TV lit half his face. "Do you think we're weird?" he asked. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the way we talk. The way we sit like this. The way I feel when I'm around you. Like I don't want to leave." My chest tightened. "I don't think it's weird," I said softly. "I think we're human, starved for real connection. And we found it, in the most unlikely place." He was quiet. Then, "I feel safest when I'm with you." That admission was warm and heavy and beautiful. But also, dangerous. Because it wasn't just about feeling safe anymore. It was about needing it. Relying on it. And I wasn't sure who needed who more. When the credits rolled, neither of us moved. The room stayed dim, hushed. And I realized, in that moment, we weren't just holding a secret between us. We were becoming one, thread by thread, in ways the world wouldn't understand. And maybe wouldn't forgive. That night, after the documentary ended and Andrew had gone upstairs, I stayed on the couch long after the screen had gone black. The room was quiet, but my thoughts weren't. It was easy to tell myself we were just close. That all of this, the lingering glances, the shared silences, the warmth between us, was innocent. That we were just two people who had found comfort in each other's broken places. But if I was honest, something had shifted. I had felt it when his hand brushed mine earlier. How I didn't pull away. I'd felt it in the look he gave me before heading up to bed, a look that held too many things at once: gratitude, trust, longing. I got up and turned off the light, the house sinking deeper into stillness. In the mirror by the hallway, I caught my reflection, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. She looked younger somehow, awake, but there was also something in her eyes, uncertainty. Guilt maybe, or was it fear? Not of Andrew. Of what we were becoming. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen making toast. He was humming, something soft and melodic. Something I didn't recognize. He smiled when he saw me. It was the kind of smile that wasn't casual anymore. It lingered. "Sleep okay?" he asked. I nodded. "You?" "Yeah," he said, then hesitated. "Actually, I dreamt we were still talking. Like we never stopped. Just kept going. I liked it." He said it so openly. So casually, but my heart stumbled. "Andrew," I began carefully, placing my hand on the counter for steadiness. "Have you ever wondered if we're too close?" He turned to me, startled. "Too close?" I nodded slowly. "I mean emotionally. I helped raise you." He didn't answer right away. Just stared at me, thoughtful. "Is it wrong to feel safe with the one person who's never made me feel small?" he asked. "No," I whispered. "It's not wrong, but it can be complicated." His eyes softened. "I'm not asking for anything. I just don't want to lose whatever this is." I stepped closer, brushing a crumb from his cheek. "I don't want to lose it either. But we need to keep talking about it. To make sure we don't blur something we can't unblur." He looked down, then back up, more serious now. "I trust you to tell me when that happens." I smiled faintly, heart aching. "And I trust you to listen when I do." We stood there in the hush of morning, something unspoken blooming quietly between us again. And this time, I didn't try to name it. Because sometimes the most powerful truths are the ones we feel before we dare speak them aloud. In today's world, where emotional connection is often masked by distraction and distance, this story serves as a reminder of how powerful being seen truly is. Many people carry silent wounds of shame, rejection, or feeling too much. The lesson here isn't about crossing lines, but about listening deeply, offering space without judgment, and recognizing when closeness turns into dependency. If someone trusts you enough to be vulnerable, honor it with care. And if you find yourself clinging to someone for comfort, pause and ask, is this healing me or hiding me? Real love, in any form, begins with honest communication.